On a warm spring morning in May 2007, in a small South Carolina community where neighbors knew each other's names and children played freely in their yards, a young woman vanished without a trace. Her name was Jennifer Marie Thompson, 23 years old, a nursing student at the local technical college, a daughter, a sister, a friend to many. She left her apartment for an early morning jog along the familiar route she took every Tuesday and Thursday, the same path she had traveled dozens of times before, past the old elementary school, through the park with the covered bridge, around the pond where ducks gathered in the reeds. Her running shoes were found 3 days later beside a drainage culvert 2 miles from her home, laces still tied, no signs of struggle in the soft earth around them. But Jennifer was gone. The question that haunted investigators, that echoed through the tight-knit community, that would remain unanswered for years was simple and terrible. What happened to Jennifer Thompson in those early morning hours, and who knew the truth all along? The town of Lawrence sits in the Piedmont region of South Carolina, roughly 40 miles southeast of Greenville, a place of rolling hills and pine forests, of textile mill heritage and Baptist church steeples rising above Main Street storefronts. In 2007, the population hovered around 10,000 souls, the kind of place where Friday night football games drew the whole community, and the diner on the square knew your regular order. The economy had struggled since the mills closed in the 90s, but people stayed because their families had always been there, because the pace of life felt manageable, because you could still leave your doors unlocked if you chose to. Jennifer Marie Thompson had grown up in Lawrence, graduated from the high school in 2002, worked for 2 years at the county hospital as a receptionist, before enrolling in the nursing program at Piedmont Technical College. She lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment on Oak Street with her roommate, Chelsea Morrison, also a nursing student. Those who knew her described a young woman with clear ambitions, someone who studied late into the night with textbooks spread across the kitchen table, who volunteered at the free clinic on Saturdays, who called her mother every Sunday evening without fail. She stood 5 feet 4 inches tall, weighed approximately 120 pounds, had shoulder-length brown hair she usually wore pulled back in a ponytail, and a constellation of freckles across her nose that made her look younger than her 23 years. The morning of May 8th began like any other Tuesday. Chelsea Morrison would later tell investigators that she woke around 5:30 to the sound of Jennifer moving quietly through the apartment, preparing for her morning run. Jennifer followed the same routine every Tuesday and Thursday. Wake at 5:15, drink a glass of water, change into running clothes, stretch in the living room for 5 minutes, leave the apartment by 5:45. She preferred running early, before the heat settled over the low country, before traffic picked up on the roads. The route she took measured exactly 4.2 miles, a loop that began at their apartment, headed east on Oak Street, turned north through Eastside Park, circled the pond, came back through the residential streets near the old textile mill, and returned home. On a typical morning, Jennifer completed the route in 38 to 40 minutes. Chelsea had heard the front door close at 5:43 that morning. She remembered the exact time because she glanced at her alarm clock, calculated that she could sleep another hour before her own classes began. The apartment had fallen silent. Outside, the sky was just beginning to light, that pale gray before sunrise, the air still cool and damp with morning dew. Birds were starting their songs in the oak trees that lined the street. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. Normal sounds. An ordinary morning. When Jennifer had not returned by 7:30, Chelsea assumed she had stopped somewhere, perhaps grabbed coffee at the convenience store near campus, maybe met another early jogger and stayed to chat. Jennifer was friendly, the type to strike up conversations easily. But when 8 o'clock passed, then 8:30, Chelsea began to feel the first flutter of concern. Jennifer had a 9 o'clock lecture on pharmacology. She never missed class. Never. Chelsea called Jennifer's cell phone. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. She called again. Same result. At 8:40, Chelsea drove the route Jennifer typically ran, looking for any sign of her roommate. The streets were quiet, the park empty except for an elderly man walking his terrier near the pond. No joggers in sight. No Jennifer. Chelsea circled back, drove slower, scanning the sidewalks, the ditches, anywhere someone might have stopped or fallen or needed help. Nothing. At 9:15, Chelsea called Jennifer's mother, Patricia Thompson, who lived 15 minutes away in the neighboring community of Clinton. Patricia's voice, when she answered, was cheerful, unsuspecting. That cheerfulness would be one of the last moments of peace she would know for years. When Chelsea explained that Jennifer had not returned from her run, that she could not reach her by phone, that this was completely unlike her daughter, Patricia felt her stomach drop. She told Chelsea to call the authorities immediately. She would drive to Lawrence right away. The Lawrence County Sheriff's Department received the report at 9:37. Deputy Marcus Williams took the initial call, noted the details. Missing adult female, last seen approximately 5:43 that morning, known to be jogging on her regular route through town. In most jurisdictions, adults are not considered officially missing until at least 24 hours have passed, but Deputy Williams, a father himself, heard something in Chelsea Morrison's voice that made him take the matter seriously. He dispatched units to begin checking the route immediately. By 10 o'clock, 3 patrol cars were moving slowly along the streets Jennifer would have traveled. Deputies walked through Eastside Park, calling her name, checking behind buildings and in the wooded areas that bordered the trails. They spoke with residents along Oak Street, asking if anyone had seen a young woman jogging that morning. Most people were at work or had been asleep. One elderly woman remembered seeing a jogger pass by around 6 o'clock, but she could not be certain of details. The color of the clothing, the direction of travel, all of it blurred in her memory. The first piece of evidence appeared at 2:15 that afternoon. A maintenance worker for the County Parks Department, clearing debris from a drainage culvert along Mill Creek Road, found a single running shoe wedged against the metal grate. He recognized it immediately as unusual, not because it was a shoe, but because it was obviously new, expensive, barely worn. He called the sheriff's department. Deputy Williams arrived within minutes, photographed the shoe from multiple angles before retrieving it with gloved hands. It was a women's Nike, size 7, predominantly white with pink accents, the kind specifically designed for distance running. The laces were still tied in a double knot. There was no mud on the sole, no signs it had been dragged or thrown. It simply sat there against the grate as if placed with care. Chelsea Morrison identified it immediately. Those were Jennifer's shoes. She had bought them just 3 weeks earlier, a splurge after receiving her financial aid refund, excited about the cushioning and support they provided. Chelsea knew because she had been with Jennifer at the sporting goods store in Greenville when she purchased them. She had watched Jennifer try on 6 different pairs before selecting these. The confirmation sent a chill through everyone present. If Jennifer's shoe was here, 2 miles from her apartment, away from her normal route, then something had gone terribly wrong. The search intensified immediately. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, more than 50 volunteers had gathered at the sheriff's department, ready to help. The community response was immediate and overwhelming. Teachers from the high school, workers from the hospital, students from the technical college, members of every church in town showed up with water bottles and flashlights and grim determination. Sheriff Thomas Caldwell organized them into teams, assigned sectors, established a grid pattern that would cover every inch of land within a 5-mile radius of where the shoe had been found. They searched until darkness made it impossible to continue safely, then resumed at first light on Wednesday morning. The second shoe was discovered Wednesday afternoon at 3:40 by a volunteer named Robert Chen, a chemistry professor at the college who had taught Jennifer in his Introduction to Sciences course the previous year. He found it approximately 30 yards from where the first shoe had been located, partially hidden in tall grass near the tree line. Like its partner, it showed no signs of struggle, no scuff marks or damage. Both shoes recovered and tagged as evidence, but Jennifer herself remained missing. Those who knew the area understood the challenges facing searchers. The woods along Mill Creek were dense with underbrush, honeysuckle vines thick as a man's wrist, brambles that tore at clothing and skin. The creek itself, swollen from recent rains, moved fast and murky between its banks. Searchers waded through water up to their waists, probing with long poles, looking for anything that did not belong. Cadaver dogs were brought in from Colombia, German shepherds trained to detect human remains. They worked the woods methodically, handlers watching for any change in behavior, any indication the dogs had caught a scent. On Thursday evening, May 10th, the dogs alerted in a wooded area approximately 100 yards from where the shoes had been discovered. Handlers marked the spot, and investigators moved in carefully, documenting everything with photographs and measurements before disturbing the scene. What they found was a small clearing, perhaps 15 feet in diameter, where the ground showed signs of disturbance. The leaf litter had been pushed aside in places, exposing bare earth. A few branches appeared to have been broken recently, the wood still showing green beneath the bark. But there was no body, no clothing, no obvious evidence of violence. Just a place where something had happened, where the natural pattern of the forest floor had been interrupted. Forensic technicians from the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division arrived to process the scene. They collected soil samples, photographed the disturbed areas, made casts of several partial impressions in the soft ground that might have been footprints, though erosion and time had degraded them significantly. They found 3 cigarette butts near the edge of the clearing, different brands, weathered enough that they could have been there for weeks or months. They bagged them anyway. Everything was potential evidence now. The investigation expanded to include interviews with everyone who might have information. Deputies spoke with Jennifer's professors, her classmates, her coworkers from the hospital, her neighbors, anyone who had regular contact with her. A picture emerged of a young woman focused on her studies, generally well-liked, no known conflicts or enemies, no romantic relationship at the time of her disappearance. She had dated occasionally, but nothing serious in recent months. Her bank accounts showed no unusual activity. Her phone records indicated normal patterns of communication, mostly calls to family, classmates, and Chelsea. One name came up repeatedly in these interviews: Marcus Lee Patterson, age 29, who worked as a groundskeeper for the county parks department. Several people mentioned that they had seen Marcus speaking with Jennifer on multiple occasions at Eastside Park. He was often there in the early mornings, mowing grass or trimming hedges, and Jennifer passed through the park on her regular running route. Those who knew him said he seemed friendly enough, always waved or called out greetings. Some noted that he appeared to pay particular attention to Jennifer, would stop his work to talk if she paused her run. One witness, an older woman who walked her dog in the park most mornings, told investigators she had noticed Marcus watching Jennifer jog past on several occasions, his eyes following her even after she disappeared down the trail. Deputies interviewed Marcus Patterson on Friday, May 11th. He agreed to speak voluntarily at the sheriff's department, arriving in his work uniform, a green polo shirt with the Parks Department logo, khaki pants, work boots caked with dried mud. He sat in the interview room with a posture of casual cooperation, hands folded on the table in front of him, answering questions in a steady, unhurried voice. Yes, he knew Jennifer Thompson, recognized her from the park. They had spoken a few times, just friendly conversation, talking about the weather, the trails, nothing significant. Yes, he had been working the morning of May 8th. Started his shift at 6 o'clock, was assigned to Eastside Park for routine maintenance. No, he had not seen Jennifer that morning. Had not seen any joggers at all during his shift, which struck him as unusual because Tuesdays typically brought several regular runners through the park. He remembered thinking it was quiet that day. Investigators asked about the timeline. If Marcus started work at 6 and Jennifer left her apartment at 5:43 for a route that would bring her through the park around 5:55 or 6 o'clock, why had he not seen her? Marcus explained that he had stopped at the maintenance shed first thing, needed to load his mower onto the trailer, spent maybe 15 or 20 minutes there before heading to his assigned area. Must have missed her during that window. They asked about his vehicle. Marcus drove a white Ford F-150 pickup truck, 2004 model, registered in his name. Where had he parked that morning? At the maintenance shed, same as always. How long had he been at the park? His shift was scheduled until 2:30, but he left early around noon because he had a dentist appointment at 1 o'clock. Investigators noted this, asked for the name of his dentist. Marcus provided it without hesitation. They could check, he said. He had nothing to hide. But something about the interview felt off to the deputies conducting it. Marcus was perhaps too calm, too cooperative, his answers smooth and practiced. When they pressed him about his interactions with Jennifer, asked if he had ever expressed romantic interest, Marcus smiled slightly and said no, nothing like that. She was just a friendly person. They exchanged pleasantries, that was all. One of the investigators noted in his report that Marcus never once asked about Jennifer's well-being, never inquired if she had been found, never expressed concern or offered to help with the search. For someone who claimed to be friendly acquaintances with a missing woman, his lack of emotional response seemed notable. They asked if he would consent to a search of his vehicle and his home. Marcus agreed without hesitation, signed the consent forms, even offered to take them to his apartment himself. The search was conducted that afternoon. Investigators went through the truck carefully, checking under seats, in the toolbox mounted in the bed beneath floor mats. They found work gloves, fast food wrappers, an old jacket, tools, receipts from the hardware store. Nothing suspicious, nothing that connected to Jennifer Thompson. His apartment was a one-bedroom unit in a complex near the highway, sparsely furnished, tidy enough. Investigators photographed everything, opened drawers, checked closets, looked under the bed and behind furniture. They found clothes, DVDs, a computer, dishes in the sink, a collection of hunting magazines. In the bedroom closet, they found several rifles and a shotgun, all properly registered, stored in a locked cabinet. Marcus explained he was a hunter, deer mostly, sometimes turkey. Been hunting since he was a boy. Everything appeared legal and above board. The dentist confirmed Marcus had an appointment at 1 o'clock on May 8th and had arrived on time. Records showed he received a routine cleaning that lasted approximately 45 minutes. The timeline checked out for the afternoon, but the morning remained murky. Investigators requested phone records for Marcus's cell phone. He consented to that as well, seemingly unconcerned about anything they might find. Days became weeks. Search teams continued combing the woods, expanding the radius, checking abandoned buildings and storage units, dragging sections of Mill Creek, questioning anyone who might have seen anything unusual. The media coverage was constant. Jennifer's photograph appeared on the evening news, in newspapers across the state, on flyers posted in every store window in Lawrence County. Tips came in by the dozens, each one investigated thoroughly. Most led nowhere. A woman resembling Jennifer had been seen at a gas station in Spartanburg. Turned out to be someone else entirely. A witness reported seeing a white pickup truck parked near Mill Creek Road early on the morning of May 8th. Investigators checked every white pickup registered in the county. None of the owners had any connection to Jennifer or the case. Patricia Thompson appeared at press conferences, her face drawn with exhaustion and fear, pleading for anyone with information to come forward. Jennifer's father, divorced from Patricia for 10 years but united now in grief, stood beside her, his hands trembling as he spoke about his daughter, about the nursing career she had worked so hard to build, about the grandchildren he had hoped she would one day give him. Chelsea Morrison struggled to sleep in the apartment she had shared with Jennifer, eventually moving back to her parents' home because the silence and emptiness had become unbearable. The case began to cool as June arrived. Investigators followed every lead, re-interviewed potential witnesses, reviewed evidence repeatedly, but nothing substantial emerged. Marcus Patterson's phone records showed normal patterns of communication, calls to family, coworkers, a few friends. His work schedule was verified by time cards and his supervisor. His truck had been processed thoroughly by forensics, and they found no trace evidence linking it to Jennifer. Without a body, without witnesses, without physical evidence connecting anyone to the disappearance, the investigation stalled. Deputies whispered quietly among themselves about Marcus Patterson. Something about him did not sit right, but instinct was not evidence. His alibi was not airtight, but it was plausible. He had cooperated fully, which could indicate innocence or could indicate confidence that nothing would be found. The investigation remained open, but active leads dried up. By August, the daily search operations had ended. The case was not closed, but it was cold. Clear's throat. For those who have ever watched hope slowly drain away, who have seen the exact moment when possibility becomes improbability, then resignation, the summer of 2007 in Lawrence was a lesson in helplessness. Patricia Thompson continued to call the sheriff's department weekly, asking for updates, pleading for someone to keep looking. Sheriff Caldwell assured her the case remained a priority, that any new information would be investigated immediately, but the tone of his voice carried the weight of reality. Without new evidence, there was little more they could do. Time moved forward because it always does, indifferent to grief and unanswered questions. Jennifer's 24th birthday passed in September, marked by a candlelight vigil in Eastside Park attended by more than 200 people. They stood in a circle holding small flames against the darkness, singing hymns, sharing memories, refusing to let her be forgotten. Patricia spoke briefly, her voice breaking as she said her daughter's name, as she insisted that Jennifer was more than a missing person case number, more than a photograph on a poster. She was real. She had mattered. She still mattered. Marcus Patterson continued working for the Parks Department, maintaining his regular schedule, showing up on time, doing his assigned tasks. Some employees avoided him, had heard the rumors, felt uncomfortable in his presence. Others defended him, said the man was innocent until proven otherwise, said people needed to stop the gossip and speculation. Marcus himself said nothing publicly about the case, declined to speak with reporters, went about his life with the same quiet routine he had always followed. In November 2007, Patricia Thompson made a decision that would haunt her for years. She held a memorial service for Jennifer, not quite a burial because there was no body, but a formal acknowledgement of loss, a way to begin processing grief that had no clear endpoint. The service was held at First Baptist Church on Main Street, the same church where Jennifer had been baptized as a child, where she had attended vacation Bible school, where her grandmother's burial service had been held 3 years earlier. More than 400 people attended, filling the pews, standing along the walls, spilling out onto the front steps. They sang Amazing Grace and It Is Well With My Soul. The pastor spoke about faith in the face of incomprehensible loss, about trusting in a plan beyond human understanding, about hope that persists even in darkness. But for Patricia, the memorial felt like giving up, like accepting that her daughter was gone, that Jennifer would not walk through the door one day with some explanation for where she had been. The guilt of that acceptance was almost worse than the not knowing. She went through the motions, thanked people for coming, accepted their condolences in casseroles, and returned home to a house that felt cavernous with silence. The years that followed were a blur of ordinary days marked by extraordinary absence. Patricia tried to maintain normalcy, continued working her job at the county library, went to church on Sundays, visited with friends. But everything felt performative, a role she was playing. The real Patricia existed in a state of suspended animation, waiting for news that never came, hopping for closure that remained eternally out of reach. She left Jennifer's childhood bedroom exactly as it had been, clothes still hanging in the closet, trophies from high school track on the shelves, a diary from 10th grade tucked in the nightstand drawer. Chelsea Morrison finished nursing school in 2009, took a job at a hospital in Charleston, moved away from Lawrence and the memories that saturated every street corner. She rarely spoke about Jennifer, found that people did not know what to say, that the story made them uncomfortable. The phrase, "I had a roommate who disappeared," tended to end conversations rather than start them. She married in 2011, had a daughter in 2013, built a life that looked normal from the outside. But she thought about Jennifer often, wondered what had happened in those missing hours, whether her friend had suffered, whether she had been afraid, whether she had called out for help that never came. The investigation remained technically open, but with no new leads, no witnesses coming forward, no evidence emerging, it existed in name only. The detectives who had worked the case moved on to other matters, retired, transferred to different departments. Files sat in storage, photographs and reports and witness statements gathering dust. Jennifer Thompson became a statistic, one of thousands of people who disappear each year, whose fates remain unknown, whose families wait forever. In 2011, 4 years after Jennifer vanished, Marcus Patterson married a woman named Angela Rhodes, a server at a restaurant in Greenville whom he had met through mutual friends. They bought a small house on the outskirts of Lawrence, settled into married life. Angela knew about the investigation, had asked Marcus directly if he had anything to do with Jennifer Thompson's disappearance. He looked her in the eyes and said no, absolutely not. The whole thing had been a nightmare for him too, being suspected, having his name dragged through rumors, when all he had done was be friendly to someone who turned out to go missing. Angela believed him, or chose to believe him, which amounted to the same thing in practical terms. They had a son in 2012, named him Tyler, a healthy baby boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. Marcus seemed to settle into fatherhood comfortably, was attentive and patient, changed diapers, and handled midnight feedings without complaint. Angela sometimes watched him with their son and felt grateful, felt that she had found a good man despite the shadow of suspicion that had once hung over him. But there were moments, small things that Angela noticed but dismissed, that accumulated over time like sediment settling at the bottom of a clear glass of water. Marcus sometimes woke in the night, his breathing rapid, his body tense, staring at the ceiling with an expression she could not quite read. When she asked if he was okay, he always said yes, just a dream, nothing to worry about, and would roll over and go back to sleep. He avoided Eastside Park entirely, would take longer routes to wherever he needed to go rather than drive past it. When Jennifer Thompson's name came up in conversation, which happened less frequently as years passed but still occurred occasionally, Marcus's jaw would tighten slightly. His shoulders would rise just a fraction, and he would change the subject as quickly as possible. In 2014, Tyler started showing signs that concerned Angela. He was 2 years old, verbal and active, but he had developed a habit of hiding things. Small objects would disappear from around the house, toys and keys and remote controls, only to turn up days later tucked behind furniture or buried in the backyard. When Angela asked why he did this, Tyler could not explain, said he did not know, just felt like hiding them. Child psychologists would later note that children sometimes process ambient anxiety in households through behaviors like this, acting out tensions they sense but cannot articulate. Tyler also drew disturbing pictures, dark scribbles with red marker that might have been just typical toddler art or might have been something more. Angela found them troubling, asked Marcus if he noticed anything unusual about their son's behavior. Marcus said no, the boy was fine, just going through phases like all kids do. But his dismissiveness felt too quick, too certain, as if he were shutting down a conversation before it could go anywhere dangerous. By 2015, the marriage had developed cracks that Angela tried to ignore. Marcus had become distant, spending long hours at work or in the garage, claiming he was fixing things that did not seem broken. They rarely spoke beyond logistical coordination about Tyler's schedule and household tasks. When Angela suggested couples counseling, Marcus refused, said they did not need outside people in their business. They could handle things themselves. But they were not handling things. They were existing in parallel, two people sharing a house but not a life. Angela's mother noticed the strain, asked her daughter directly if everything was okay at home. Angela gave the standard responses. Marriage is hard, they were working through things, it would be fine. But she did not sound convinced, and her mother heard the doubt in her voice. In December 2015, Angela's mother asked her a question that changed everything. Do you feel safe with him? The question hit Angela like cold water. Did she feel safe? She had never thought about it in those terms. Marcus had never been violent with her, never raised a hand, never even raised his voice above a certain level. But safe was different from not being in immediate danger. Safe meant trust, meant certainty, meant knowing the person beside you in bed was who they claimed to be. And Angela realized in that moment that she was not sure. She did not know who Marcus really was, what he might be capable of, what he might have done before they met. She started paying more attention to small things after that conversation. The way Marcus's hands shook slightly when Dateline or 48 Hours came on television. How he always found a reason to leave the room during true crime shows. The fact that he had never once, in all their years together, mentioned visiting Eastside Park, despite working there for years, despite it being a central feature of the community. The careful way he worded things when talking about the past, always vague about specific dates and times, always redirecting to different topics. In March 2016, Angela made a decision. She told Marcus she needed space, that she was taking Tyler to stay with her mother for a while just to think, just to figure things out. Marcus did not argue, did not plead for her to stay, just nodded and said okay, if that was what she needed. The ease of his acceptance felt telling, as if he had been expecting this, or perhaps even wanted it but could not be the one to leave. Living at her mother's house, Angela found herself looking at her marriage with new clarity, the distance providing perspective she had lacked while in the middle of things. She remembered odd comments Marcus had made over the years, statements that seemed innocent at the time but now carried different weight. Once, after a news story about a missing hiker being found alive after weeks in the wilderness, Marcus had said, "People don't just survive like that. When someone's really gone, they're gone for good." The certainty in his voice had struck her, as strange even then. She thought about the hunting trips he took, always alone, always to places he never quite specified. He would return with venison sometimes, proof that he had actually been hunting, but the frequency of trips seemed excessive for the amount of game he brought home. Where was he going? What was he doing during all those hours in the woods? In June 2016, Angela filed for separation. Not divorce yet, but legal separation, establishing custody arrangements for Tyler, dividing assets, creating formal distance. During this process, she spoke with her attorney about her concerns, her vague unease about Marcus, her suspicions that he might be hiding something significant. The attorney listened carefully and then asked a question that made Angela's stomach drop. Have you ever considered that he might have had something to do with that missing woman, the nursing student from 2007? Angela had considered it, of course. The thought had crossed her mind hundreds of times, but she had always pushed it away, told herself she was being paranoid, that Marcus had been investigated and cleared, that she was letting community gossip influence her judgment. But hearing someone else voice the suspicion made it real, gave it weight and substance. Tyler, now 4 years old, had started talking more, and some of the things he said worried Angela deeply. He told his grandmother that Daddy sometimes went to the quiet place in the trees when he was upset. When asked what he meant, Tyler could not explain further, just said it was a place Daddy went, a place where you had to be very quiet. Angela felt chills run down her spine. In August 2016, Tyler said something during a visit with Marcus that would prove to be the turning point in a 9-year-old cold case. They were at a park, not East Side but a different one across town, and Tyler was playing on the swings when he suddenly asked his father, "Why did the lady stop running?" Marcus froze. Angela, who had come to pick up Tyler, was walking toward them and heard the question. She stopped, waiting to hear Marcus's response. "What lady?" Marcus asked, his voice tight. "The one from the trees, the one you showed me." Marcus's face went pale. He looked at Tyler, then at Angela, then back at Tyler. "I don't know what you're talking about, buddy. You must be confused." But Tyler was insistent. "You showed me where the lady stopped running, in the woods. You said we had to be quiet there." Angela's heart was pounding. She walked closer, knelt down next to Tyler. "When did Daddy show you this, sweetheart?" Tyler thought for a moment. "Lots of times, when we go walking. He shows me the place and says we have to be very quiet and not tell." Angela looked at Marcus. His jaw was clenched, his eyes fixed on some point in the distance. He did not deny it, did not say Tyler was making it up or had an overactive imagination. He just stood there, silent, caught. That evening, after Tyler was in bed, Angela called the Lawrence County Sheriff's Department. She asked to speak with someone about the Jennifer Thompson case. She was transferred to Detective Sarah Martinez, who had taken over the cold case files when the original investigators retired. Angela explained who she was, her relationship to Marcus Patterson, and what Tyler had said at the park. Detective Martinez listened carefully, taking notes, asking clarifying questions. She had reviewed the Jennifer Thompson file multiple times over the years, knew that Marcus Patterson had been a person of interest, but that evidence had been insufficient to charge him. This new information, a child's statement about being shown a place in the woods, was not necessarily enough on its own, but it was something. It was the first new lead in nearly a decade. The next day, Detective Martinez visited Angela at her mother's house. She brought a child forensic interviewer, someone trained to speak with young witnesses in a way that avoided leading questions or suggestion. Tyler was interviewed gently, asked to draw pictures of the place Daddy had shown him, asked to describe what it looked like, what they did there. Tyler drew trees, lots of trees, and a circle of cleared ground. He said they walked there sometimes, that Daddy would stand very still and quiet. That sometimes Daddy's eyes would get wet like he was crying, but he never made sounds. The investigator asked if Tyler could remember how to get to this place. Tyler nodded. He thought so. It was past the old bridge, through the thick trees to where the ground got soft. His descriptions, filtered through a 4-year-old's vocabulary, were limited but consistent. He had been there multiple times. Daddy had shown him. They had to be quiet. Based on Tyler's statements, Detective Martinez assembled a search team. On September 12, 2016, investigators returned to the woods along Mill Creek, to the area where Jennifer's shoes had been found 9 years earlier, to the clearing that had shown signs of disturbance. They brought cadaver dogs again, newer animals trained with more advanced techniques. They brought ground-penetrating radar. They brought a grim determination to find what had been hidden for nearly a decade. The dogs alerted in the same clearing that had been noted in 2007, but this time investigators had better technology, better training, better understanding of what they were looking for. The ground-penetrating radar showed an anomaly approximately 3 feet below the surface, a disturbance in the soil density that was consistent with a burial site. They excavated carefully, documenting every inch, sifting through dirt and roots and rock. 2 feet